we kind of like started, I don't know, everybody started with mobile first, but now we kind of started with content first, like let's make our content really fit into the site. And that actually made the site really clean. And it's easy to understand. You can take it in chunks, and in the end, we're trying to offer what the traveler is looking for, right?
So today I'm joined by Todd Sarouhan. He is a destination marketing champ. He's the founder of Delphina Travel Group, and he has cracked the nut when it comes to creating engaging content for destination marketing. He successfully started, he grew, and then he developed Go Visit Costa Rica. That was 18 years ago in the early 2000s. And then just to prove to everybody that he knows what he's doing, he's done it again. You can go to govisitsandiego.com and see how he's done it a second time around. So keep listening to today's podcast to learn how to create engaging content that users really love. Hey Todd, thanks so much for joining us today.
Cool, thanks for having me.
So I'm curious, I was stalking you on LinkedIn before we met today, and I always look to see what do people do at university, and there you went and did chemistry, and I'm so really curious how you went from a degree in chemistry to becoming an internet entrepreneur. What happened? Tell me about that journey.
Well, when I went to college, I graduated in '98, so internet really, it was just starting in the very baby steps, so that really wasn't an option at the time. I studied chemistry, and like 3/4 of the way through it, I realized that's not anything I wanted to do. So I finished my degree, and then, I guess as not knowing what I'd do, I decided to go backpacking. And so I went to South America. I was gone for about a year and a half. I came home twice, one for a wedding, not mine, and then one for for Christmas with my family. Anyway, it was really awesome. I still, when I got home, had no idea what I wanted to do. After a year and a half, I had a great time and learned a lot. But I kind of fell into the into the travel website space.
Right.
And I adapted it to doing it for Costa Rica since I had spent quite a bit of time there. Prior to the year and a half, I did a study abroad in Costa Rica in college and went back, 3 or 4 times. So it just kind of like morphed, and it's just kind of funny how things work out in the end, I didn't realize traveling would actually be my career,
Yeah, so what drew you specifically to Costa Rica?
I went on there in a study abroad, really knowing nothing about Costa Rica in 1995. Costa Rica was pretty unknown at that time.
Yeah.
But the forests and all the images, all that stuff, which, I grew up in Southern California, we don't have that kind of thing. That's what really drew me in, and then my eyes opened. Once I got there, and there's this whole new world, and languages do matter. Like in high school, taking Spanish, I thought it was, not useful until actually now I'm fluent in Spanish. But I just think that just traveling in general is just an amazing thing. And that's kind of drew me to all that stuff in my career. So.
Awesome. And so you went from travel to writing about destinations, or specifically Costa Rica. But in terms of understanding your why and what gets you out of bed, the problem you're solving, is it for you more about enabling that nomadic, or what was about enabling that nomadic lifestyle? What gets you out of bed now, because you're no longer in Costa Rica? What is your why?
I still do travel a lot, still go to Costa Rica a lot. We have a team in Costa Rica, so that's definitely something that still happens. In general, I love traveling. And I love sharing my stories with everybody. And what a better way to do it on the web, So we can literally reach millions of people. In Costa Rica, the site's been live for 18 years. I have no idea total amount of traffic, but it's a lot. And we're one of the top sites in Costa Rica now. So we can tell our story to people, and we can have them not only enjoy, but learn about the world and different cultures. So that's what really, I guess, is my why.
Awesome. And obviously, you've transitioned from just being focused on one property, Go Visit Costa Rica, to now Go Visit San Diego. Tell us about that shift in focus, or the diversification. What led you to doing that in the first place?
Well, a couple of things. Diversification, as I found out the hard way, is something that's very necessary. Our site got hit by various algorithm updates over the years, Panda being one. Lost a lot of traffic. obviously if you have multiple properties, that not to say it couldn't all happen at once, but chances are much less. So diversification is huge, right? But also I was kind of, after running a site for 18 years, as you can probably imagine, things get a little dull. Even Costa Rica is awesome. I love it, right? But still, it's 18 years, right? So having a new travel destination, I was like, what a perfect way to build my passion back up, And I live in San Diego, so it just seemed pretty natural.
Awesome. And I'm curious as to, when you look back and compare your day one of deciding, hey, I'm going to go visit San Diego versus your day one of go visit Costa Rica, what was different about that first step, apart from maybe buying the domain names, or maybe you bought all the domain names already, but what's shifted in the past 20 years from the way that you approach building it?
It's completely night and day difference, like not even comparable. I started building Go Visit Costa Rica in 2002. I knew nothing about internet marketing or any of that, right? Or automation or all of that. And we're all about automation on the site. We have a small team. We're 3 of us. We actually just added 1. But we're small, right? And we had to automate things. But with Costa Rica, there was a lot of learning, a lot of missteps, a lot of things that I wish I had done, that maybe some things you can correct and some things you can't technically wise, right? Technology wise. Where San Diego, we took everything we learned, and we kind of put it all together in one big chunk, I guess, and that's just how we launched it. It's still an extremely difficult process for San Diego, right? It took 1 year and 4 months to actually launch the website.
And so tell me about that process. That 1 year and 4 months, how can you break that down at a high level? What happened month by month and why it took that long?
Well, we wanted to rebuild the site from scratch. So Go Visit Costa Rica was built from scratch as well, but as you can imagine, in 2002, technology was much different than it is now. So we decided to build the site in .NET, and of course that meant a whole new rebuild. We built our own custom CMS. Everything is custom, right? So we really wanted to make sure that people, our admin people entering things into the site, had the ability to do that, to do it easily, to do it efficiently, because that's a huge roadblock. Not roadblock, but I guess it just, sometimes if you don't do it right, it can take a long time for something that could be quicker, right? So we put a lot of thought into that. Also just thought straight into the technology of how we're going to do the CDNs and things that didn't really exist in 2002, which now exist, makes life easier. Different formats of images, WebP versus JPEG. There's all these different things. There's thousands and thousands of things. So kind of from day one, started planning the content. The content, we launched with about 500 pages on the site. As you can imagine, it's a lot of content. I think our average word length is about 1,700 words on those 500 pages. And not only did we need written content, we needed images, we needed videos, we needed all that stuff that goes into creating a travel site. So I'm not a writer, but I was deeply involved in the strategy on that and creating the briefs, which I think we'll get into in a little bit. Which kind of setting up our writers for success. We don't want to send articles back because we don't like them. We want to get what we're looking for, and so that was something that put a lot of time into, and page design and usability and speed and all kinds of things like that.
Cool. So when you started the project, though, did you have a plan for month 1 to 3 we're doing content strategy and we're doing back-end development, months 3 to 6? Did it look like that, or was it more organic?
Kind of, but I honestly, so I started it in January 2019. No, 2020, right before the pandemic, right? So January 2020, and I had a really unrealistic view that we could launch it in 4 months, right? I'm not even talking about getting the content written in 4 months, right? But just launching the whole thing in 4 months. Obviously, that didn't happen. It just kept being pushed back and back and back. And things that I thought would be take a few hours, took a week. This in terms of content, we had to read all of our content, and that took a long time. The actual programming, I did the coding of the site. That wasn't like crazy, but there is a lot of details too. You have to make sure it works on all the devices and spacing's right and usability and all that fun stuff. So that was a huge learning curve, right?
And in that process of building a new site, can you share perhaps what your biggest screw up was? Something that, even though you've done it once before, and iterated on it however many times during the past 20 years, you still screwed up unexpectedly?
I mean, I would say, in terms of content, that was probably, we started with hotels. We have I think we launched about 180 or so hotels. We had those written by a company. I gave them very little direction how to write that. I think it was like just very briefly, like 3 sections, and this is about this, this, and this. It wasn't enough detail to give writers, so sometimes, like right now on some of the hotels, we're probably going to have to go and rewrite those to make them to the level that the rest of the site is. Yeah. We found that out after about 120 hotels written.
Right. Okay. Right. So that cost a lot of time and I guess some money as well.
Right. It will cost money.
So I'm curious as to, let's kind of switch into this because I think this plays into what I want to talk about in terms of creating engaging content that really resonates with users. Tell me, what's your kind of high level philosophy? Like, what is engaging content to you? What do you think content or the characteristics of content that users do want to engage with, and that you do see getting those repeat visits, those long dwell times, those click-throughs, those lower bounce rates? Is that what engaging content is for you, or how do you understand it?
So, I guess from the beginning, we decided that it was best to not just have a straight template and try to fit the content in. We decided to look at the actual content, say, for a beach page or a neighborhood page.
Right.
And of course, those are two different things, right? And for, say, neighborhood page, we're like, look, this one's going to have 7 sections that, be an overview, then it'll be like things to do and so on, right? Parking, getting there, tips. And we came up with like these templates for each kind of page, right? Let's say sections for each kind of page, not templates, right? So we probably had, 20 different templates like that, and then designed it around that. We didn't send anything to the designer until we had all that done. So we gave the designer very little room to screw up as well, right? So we kind of like started, everybody's heard of mobile first, but now we kind of started with content first, like let's make our content really fit into the site. And that actually made the site really clean. And it's easy to understand. You can take it in chunks, and we're, in the end, we're trying to offer what the traveler is looking for, right?
And so how do you know what a traveler is looking for?
Well, we've been in the travel business for a long time, right? So for Costa Rica, we know what worked there, and what content pieces would work, and what pages had longer dwell time. And so we borrowed a lot from that, of course, right?
Right.
So Costa Rica was a really big learning ground for us. And we kind of like developed a website architecture similar to Costa Rica on the things that did work. And there was parts of Costa Rica that didn't work, right? Or still are kind of broken, but it's just too much to fix without a rebuild, right?
Right. Cool. So in terms of, actually then creating that engaging content, so you're drawing insights from things that have worked previously on previous sites. You're trying to build around the architecture, around usability and simplicity, and around the content itself. But in terms of actually that on-page content, the content that makes the user stay on the page and click through, and probably then you getting paid, how do you do that? What's your plan, your master plan for making sure that content's good?
So kind of started, like I said, and with the content and saying, okay, this will be 6 sections, or this template will be 8 sections. Then put that into kind of a design where between, say, each section we would have a widget. That widget could be anything, right? It could be an image, it could be featured hotel, it could be popular activities, it could be a map, it could all kinds of things. So for each one, we kind of inserted these maybe dozen or 15 or so different widgets, the ones that made sense for that particular page, right? For like a beach page, we're going to feature some nearby hotels or some beach activities that can be done, or a map, right, that shows where you're at. And really wanted to not just have a wall of content, right? We wanted to break that experience up, but also use things on the page, like all of our left-hand navigation is page navigation. So, and it floats with you as you scroll down. The left-hand navigation stays there, and at each section as you're in, it highlights where you're at. So it'll say overview, or it'll say, I don't know, get your gear, and that's a little widget for this city pass that we have. Things like that. So it kind of goes down, so the users really can see where they're at. Some of these pages, I mean, like I said, its average content length is 1,700 words, but a lot of them were in the 2000s. That's a lot of words, right? And then we start to add images on that, and you start to add other widgets. I mean, you're talking thousands, tens of thousands of pixels high, these pages. And on mobile as well. You know, it gets long. So we really wanted to engage the user and show them where they're at and what they can do and how they can get there and things like that, right?
And so I mean, it might be worth talking about monetization. So can you talk to me a bit about how the monetization works? Is it affiliates based on hotels primarily and attractions? I mean, you mentioned your pass. Talk me about your monetization model and how that feeds into that kind of user engagement, because ultimately, you want the user to do something, but you want to help the user at the same time. How do you marry those two things?
Well, we know that when people are doing the research phase on traveling to a destination, they need a couple of things. They need knowledge about the destination. That's where our content site comes in. They need places to stay, or even suggestions. People don't know where to stay. People might have an idea of types of hotels they like, but they don't know where to stay. So we're off our hotels. We have about 230 dedicated pages to hotels on our site. So when you go there, and it's an affiliate, right? So we'll be like the Hotel del Coronado. We have a whole page about that we wrote the content, that we took some of the pictures. Some are the hotels give us some of those pictures, and of course we get paid when somebody books a room there, right? We also have tours. You can book tours, one-day tours, or a surfing lesson, or you can rent gear, things like that. There's this thing called the Go Pass that is basically a pass that they're in, like, I don't know, a dozen major cities around the world. San Diego's one, where you can buy this pass for 1, 2, 3, 4 days, 5 days, and it gets you into like SeaWorld and the zoo and museums, and gets you surf lessons and all the stuff that you can, as much as you can fit in those number of days you purchased. So that's a big thing we push on the site. And of course, we're going to have display ads once we get to the traffic levels needed for that.
Awesome. And so in terms of, so you basically thought out the kind of the wireframes, the architecture of the page that are going to be most engaging, that users are going to resonate with. Talk to me about then briefing in the content to get that content created. Did you need content briefs? It sounds like, you alluded to the fact that you tried with a very light brief and then changed your mind and headed in a different direction. So talk to me about the writer content briefs and how you develop them, or what's important in a good writer brief.
Right. So I mean, over the years with Costa Rica, I went through many different writers. Never really gave them clear direction. We'd give the topic and the word count, right? Really not much information past that. And the stuff you get back is as expected, right? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it sucks, sometimes it's just like wrong format, Sometimes it's good, it's just things are in the wrong order, or it just doesn't fit into your site. And obviously for San Diego, this whole content first approach, it needed to fit in. Like in our CMS, you have to put the content in by section. So there's 6 sections on the site. For that particular page, then you put it in by the 6 sections. That's how we put widgets in between. So that made it really necessary that each section was about the right thing that was consistent. It's all about consistency too, because we want the user to know what to expect once they've been on our website.
Right.
They're going to know, like, oh, look, in this section, I'm going to find the tips or parking or whatever, right? So, really necessary to create those really detailed briefs. And of most people I've talked to, they don't do that. But I have to say, like, even if you have an average writer, you're going to make your average writer a good writer. Like, just giving them what you expect, right?
And so, talk me through the process of creating those briefs then. So you're detailing section by section, here are the things to include, and these are the keywords to include within those sections, or what level of detailed...
Well, so we did it by section, not by page, right? So say like the parks and nature section, which has all the different parks and hiking trails and stuff like that in San Diego. So the brief is for the section, not for the page.
Right.
Right. So you'd say, okay, so the first one would be like the overview of the park. Okay, so you're going to talk about, just the general information about the park, maybe when it was created, kind of maybe anything general about it, right? And then the next section would be the history. So a little bit about we're talking like, I don't know. So we actually put the word count in there as well, but you put, a section about history, and then the next one, the type of nature you'll encounter at this park. Or in the next section, what it's known for, or things you can do there. Because all of them are a little different. They're not all the same, of course, right? So you want to give them a little bit of room to write about it, but these are the general topics. So the fifth section, like getting there and parking. And the last section is know before you go and tips, which actually that's the last section of almost all of our pages, right? And parking was a big one too, depending on the kind of page it is, right? So once you get that there, then it's like per like, I don't know, you give them 2 or 3 like additional things, say in the overview or in the history, and you kind of give them like the right direction to go. We don't give any keywords at this point. We do throw onto some of the higher volume pages, and we're not writing for volume, right? We're not creating a page based on volume, search volume. But on the ones that do have high volume, then we use tools like Market Muse, right? Which then gives them extreme detail on exactly word count, different sections, all the words you can mention, and so on, right? But that's kind of an add-on thing to the brief. The brief is the real, what they have to go by. Right?
Okay, so you're predefining section by section, here are the things to include, and you've made those sections uniform across the site so writers know what to expect, and what to receive. It all fits in well with your CMS. And then in terms of like managing that process then, so you've got here hundreds of pages, you've got hundreds though of different sections of content, which is you're developing them section by section. How did you manage that process of, each page has got multiple sections in it. We're talking about probably thousands of different sections and being written by different people. I'm curious how you manage that kind of whole process.
Like the actual writing of it?
Yeah. How did you manage all those thousands of pieces, like the moving parts?
We had to read the content, and luckily there was very little edits. Every now and again you get something small, maybe like on directions or things like that. But there was very little edits to them because we gave them so much detail. It was really high level detail, or not high level, low level, I guess, detail, right? They just knew exactly what to write about. And if you put Market Muse on top of it, it is a bulletproof article and some things that we didn't even realize to mention. You're like, oh yeah, you should talk about that,
Yeah. And so you're bringing together these thousands of little nuggets of content in sections. Talk to me about visuals then, and were they part of the brief to find interesting visuals that bring this section to life, or how did you deal with that and use visuals to break up the content?
Yeah, so I actually laid that out, right? It actually not graphically, but in a spreadsheet, So you have like content 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and in between that, depending on the page type, you're like, okay, under here, let's do a featured hotel, or here, let's do main image collage, or under here, let's do, popular activities and things like that, right? Or the Go Card feature. So that was based on type of page and what we think people are looking for, right? So if it's under parks and nature, they're probably not looking for a hotel, right? So we didn't feature hotels as much there. We would feature, maybe outdoor tours, things like that, things that we think that they'd be interested in. So that was a section by section. And like I said, there's about, 15 to 20 of those, right? So it did take time for sure, but in the end, it really pays off. Just getting the usability down, right?
Cool. So one of the things you mentioned is Market Muse. I'm curious what other tools you've used and liked or not liked as part of that process of creating all this content and optimizing the content. What is in your toolkit?
Well, now that the site's launched, of course, we use like Ahrefs, and I rely pretty good on Ahrefs. Market Muse is still a really big. Market Muse has a lot of different things to it. I really like that tool. It's a little expensive, but I think it's worth it.
What are the tools in Market?
Things like that.
What are the tools in Market Muse that you find, most useful?
Well, to begin with, I think they call them their briefs, right? So that's when you give them a topic like San Diego Zoo, and they give you back this like list of things like, okay, here's what your title should be, here's what your first section H2 should be, and here's all the things to mention in there, and here's the actual word count, the percentage of word count for this section and section 2, and they actually give you the names, right? They actually give you the content for like the titles, right? And then it says mention these 30 words or things like that, right? Word count and percentage of sections work to the word count. Those are amazing. And when you give that to a writer and that writer uses them, which is another issue, right? You got to make sure your writer's using all this stuff, right? Then that's when you start to get these really, really awesome articles. So, but once we launch, then Market Muse will actually index your site, and they'll start to tell you where you're like, what pages are starting to get more topical authority than other pages, and where you can start to like, okay, it's going to be easier to rank on this page.
Yeah.
For this particular topic. So that's really been helpful.
Cool. So
shout out to Jeff Coyle on that one.
He's you're using Market Muse for that content optimization, and Href for tracking keywords and keyword research. Any other tools that you're using as you develop content?
Well, I use Screaming Frog, but that's not really for content. That's for finding issues with the site, broken images or broken links, 404 pages. Hopefully you don't have any internal error pages, but it'll find that as well. So that I always like to make the site super bulletproof, where there's really nothing that's broken on the site, right? So we use that as well. Of course, Google Search Console is a nice little tool to use, and analytics, of course, right?
And I'm curious, going back to the technology, you talked about, you developed your own CMS in .NET. Was there a reason you went for that rather than WordPress?
So I really don't like WordPress. I don't like how, it's not just WordPress, I'm not picking that, it's like Drupal is the same way. It's just out of the box, trying to create this out of the box product that for millions of sites to use, that of course it's going to be overkill for any one site, because there's going to be many sections that aren't used and things like that. So speed's always been a big factor in my our sites, and obviously in search now. So just being a developer on, I don't know, it's something that creating your own is just better. You get to do exactly what you want. You don't have to rely on plugins and things like that. It's also pretty good with security too, because nobody knows your code, right? With WordPress, they know your code, right?
Yeah. Cool. That's interesting. And so, in terms of what you're trying to build and how you're trying to develop the Go Visit San Diego site, what's on the roadmap for you as you've pumped out a ton of the content to launch the site? What are you trying to build now? Where do you hope to see it in the next year, the next 5 years? What's the roadmap there?
So right now there's still things that we're missing upon launch that we're adding. Of course, we're adding new content. From day one, we started adding new content, right? So we're doing that monthly, adding new content. But the big project that's up on the near horizon is a whole custom mapping part of the site that's going to go on most of the pages, where basically we're using Esri Maps, which is like a base map that Google Maps uses, right? And then you can put layers on that. So you can put like a layer of hotels. So say we have downtown San Diego in the map, you put your layer of hotels and then when people move the map, they'll actually be able to move all the way up to Oceanside and still see all those hotels, right? It's not going to have to reload, and everything's done in the background. But we're going to, add breweries and hotels and beaches and attractions and all kinds of things, just so people know where they're at, right? Because that's another thing, just trying to find places that you don't know, and just not knowing is, maps are huge.
Yeah.
Google Maps are great, but unfortunately, anybody but Google can't use the rich features they have. They do have a very pared down version of their Google Map, which is very expensive to use, but if you have a lot of traffic. So that's why we decided to create our own. So that's I'm super excited about.
That's cool. And in terms of the roller, I'm curious about that as well, because your approach was, build a foundation of content before launching rather than just drip feeding as you went.
Right.
Talk to me about the strategy around that big release, and how you went about that. What happened on launch day?
So a lot of people talk to me about this. The thing is, the site's not a blog, right? So it's not just content. We're not like adding content chronologically. It's a destination site. So it's really centered around neighborhoods. We have about 47 neighborhoods right now in San Diego. Centered around neighborhoods, around beaches. We went to every beach. There's about 75 beaches we have here. So we couldn't just launch it halfway. Like it's like buying a guidebook that half of it's just blank.
Right.
We had to have like the major stuff in there, like the neighborhoods and the beaches and the things you can do there, hotels. We've added some hotels since, right? But we added, I think, about 180 at launch. We're at like 230 now, right? And of course, we're adding more articles. For sure, there's more things to add. But we needed that base in there upon launch, right? That was something that was super important.
Awesome. And then in terms of users and repeat users, we talked about the on-page interacting about, creating an engaging layout and then thinking about the content strategy and how that translates onto the page to make this really engaging. In terms of your user acquisition strategy, did you combine that with any social media, email list building? How are you driving traffic to the site on launch to make sure it gets picked up so that it starts indexing, so people start going and coming back?
Right.
What was your plan around that?
So we, of course, we have social. We're actually starting a really big push on YouTube right now, where we're going to start launching like 4 or 5 videos a week and trying to get some really big push onto YouTube. Instagram and Facebook and all that. But YouTube and Instagram are kind of the focus right now. We had a pretty authoritative site for Costa Rica, so of course, sister site linking over. But, it takes some time too, right? Nothing's going to happen immediately. Do a little bit of paid ads and try to get that initial push that we need, So that part for sure is a little frustrating because you want your baby to go, right? But you gotta walk before you run, I guess.
Right. And so, how has the traffic matched or not matched your expectations, and how is that developing?
My expectations, I had no idea. I hadn't launched a site in 18 years. And of course, 18 years ago was much different than it is now. So it's going slower than I want it to go, but it's still, we're ranking. We have some number 1 keywords that we rank for, Awesome. We're doing awesome on beaches right now. So it's just about building this topical authority. And again, Market Muse is a great resource for that, showing us like what is really gaining authority and what isn't, you know. So we need to just continue to do that, and I think I have a lot of confidence that it's not going to be a problem.
Awesome. And so, I mean, you've talked a bit about what's on your roadmap with literally creating maps, about doing more on social, creating, building out your video. What as you've kind of looked back on the past 20 years and now, look ahead to the next 20 years, what are you trying to get better at as a site owner, as a site operator? What are the things that you are, trying to become even more expert in?
So, it took me 18 years to launch site number 2. I wanted to take like a year and a half to launch site number 3, right? Not 18 again. So I want to have a portfolio of travel sites, of destinations that I love, because you have to have the passion. You can't just go and launch a site for someplace you've never been. There's a lot of local knowledge in these sites. So that, I want to, in the next year and a half to 2 years, launch another site and do it again, right? And I think as we continue to do it, we're going to get better and more efficient. Maybe the launch will take a year instead of a year and 4 months, right? Or maybe we can get it, into 10 months, right? I think that's kind of like for the future. I don't know. I love doing this stuff, so it's awesome to wake up and you're doing research on stuff you love.
Yeah,
it's great.
Definitely. What are the worst bits of it though? I mean, you're clearly passionate about creating content. You're a bit of a geek, building stuff out, and you love the technology side of it as well. What's the worst, most challenging part of what you do?
Trying to get people. So we have a small team, right, and managing them, which is great. Everybody, we're super small and super close, but you got to manage people. I'm okay at it. I'm not bad at that, but I have a hard time giving up things I'm doing, to hand it off to somebody else so we can maybe do it a little faster, right?
Right.
So that's something I'm working at, trying to let go a little bit, right? Or
cool.
Finding the right things to let go on, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, let's close out with a lightning round, and I'm curious to know, what of your personal habits do you think have contributed most to your success over the past 2 decades?
That's a tough one, right? But I think keeping focus is a really, especially working at home, you're alone. I mean, we have a team, but we're all remote. So you just really have to keep focused. So I love to surf, and I think that's something that helps me out. So it's kind of my zen,
Awesome. Can you share an internet tool or resource that you use regularly that you love?
Well, I mentioned Market Muse. That's one of the new ones. I've been using that for the past year and a half, and I really like it. The more you dive into it, the more useful it is, and that's something I'm really into right now.
Cool. What book have you read recently that you'd recommend, or that's really influenced your thinking or your approach to the way you do business?
So I'm funny. Like I love reading nonfiction stuff, right? So I'm always reading about like business stuff, and I seriously have a stack like this because I love buying the books, and I read the first chapter, and but one book that really stands out, which I actually was at a conference, a search conference, and it was just given to you. It was like on the table when you walk in. I cracked it open like 2 months after I went to the conference, but it's called Making Websites Win. And it's about usability. It's awesome. It's a great, great book. And I actually, I haven't read the 100%, but I'm probably like 80% of the way through it, which is really good for me, right? But it's a lot of just kind of hands-on how you do usability tests and design and UX and all that stuff, So it's kind of geeky, but it's awesome.
Awesome. And for someone at the beginning of their digital media journey, maybe they are thinking about starting their first site, what piece of advice would you give them?
I would say, for me, what's really worked, I think, is having passion in whatever you're choosing, right? I don't think if you don't really like it, you're not going to last very long. You're not going to last those ups and downs that, unfortunately, entrepreneurship has. Sometimes a lot of it, right? So you really need to pick something you have a lot of passion in. I think that will help even out those down times, you know?
Definitely. Cool. Well, Todd, thanks so much for joining us today. Where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
So, of course, they can visit our site at Go Visit San Diego, and we have a contact form on there, and also Go Visit Costa Rica. Contact form on there, but I'm on LinkedIn as well. So I'm an open book. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can either write on either of those sites in the contact form or go to LinkedIn. And I would love to help anybody out.
Awesome. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great having you with us.
Cool. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
And if you enjoyed what you heard today, please subscribe, stay in touch on the indiemedia.club, and please leave us a review too. But until next time, thank you so much for listening.